Thank you for coming. One of the reasons to organize a PyCon was always I wanted to have an education track, and then I settled down. I want one education speak. And then I wanted one education speaker. And I got none of this because my skills with connecting to teachers are not so perfect, even if I work a lot with teachers. I teach in schools, I make workshops there, but I understood if I really want a room full of teachers to have a meaningful discussion about education, I need 3 years in advance planning, and I did not have that. But I did the next best thing. I asked my wife, please tell me some names from the speakers, and she chose some, and I invited all of them here. Because I think we have one in common, we all at one point in our life learned Python, and maybe we have also ideas of how to teach Python, or some of us even teach it or are in contact with the teaching business or the methods of teaching Python. To myself, I run a small business teaching Python to children and adults. One of my students is here in this room. He has an orange t-shirt, but I will not point finger or show any names. He also. Okay. One last question to the audience. Is anyone here involved in the teaching business? So university lecture, okay? Okay, super. Later, please just join the discussion, okay?
Okay, let's start with the first round. I'm trying to moderate this. I also came quite late to the discussion. I would really like to know what every one of you considers important in teaching, and especially in teaching Python. So if you have some ideas on that, I would appreciate that. Let's go from left to right. That's good.
Okay, hi, I'm PJ. So I come from a somewhat different background. It's not a formal teaching situation, but I work in developer advocacy. So a lot of that involves educating developers either to get to the next level or to even get started. For me, I think that teaching Python, the real entry point was with meetup groups. I think that it's a great way to introduce people. I think that meetup groups often center around the fact that people have a shared interest. But one thing that they usually lack is that getting started kind of thing. So luckily, and we talked yesterday about the fact that when I started using Python, it was the Python 2 to Python 3 conversion. So there was like a whole learning curve. But at the same time, now that we have things like Python 3 and there's so many resources, it's really easy to find a meetup group or like, I know that they used to call them like Rails Bridge, which is what the Ruby community used to do, but opportunities for people to come in short form, in a workshop form, learn it to get started, get that kind of initial reaction where they build their Hello World program and they get the feeling, and that really generates a lot of interest and gets people moving forward. So for me, I think the focus on education is always getting to that first Hello World moment where you can develop a simple Python program, set up localhost, see it on a screen and say, hey, I can do this. And I think that's the key to getting started.
Definitely. I would say maybe two things. One of them is pseudocode. I guess it's very important for beginning, and I would have started out even this way, that you start out writing the program in a human language in order to just start out writing and not thinking about which function to drop and how to call it, but just writing in human language what the program is going to do. And maybe this is a little bit irritating, but I would say that some kind of version control, it don't has to be a Git or something like that, but it's very important to show students that even if it is only single files, that you save your files as often as possible. They don't need much space in order to really understand when it is working and when it is not, just to see how the development is going through the learning progress. I guess these two things are very important for me.
Well, I would say that I teach Python for junior people on my job, if there are some, and I'm still learning Python. If I see a person who is more experienced, I just come, ask an advice, and then ask to review my code. So I think that's an infinite process. I teach also my wife Python, and I think the key to success is to start as soon as possible to do like the real project. So define the scope, define what you want to do. Like if it's a game, like start with the game. If it's like a Telegram bot, start with it. Like define the real project. Like don't solve this like tasks from lead code. Don't try to, you know, like do something trivial, because a real project, they are more complicated, and you need to get this sense how to solve like real problems. So that would be my advice. Start as soon as possible with a real project. It can be a small one, but define it and move forward.
Yeah, Pamphile here. So I sort of want to echo on what you just said. I'm coming from, so I'm a maintainer of open source projects, so I maintain SciPy and also contributing a lot to Scientific Python. And here what we really try to do all the time when we have new people coming in is to get them started and to have quickly something so that they're just getting the hinge for it, and they just want to continue to do something. So we always try to get them to do some small PR about documentation or a quick fix that we identified. And to me, that's really the key in getting people interested in Python and also in your project, to really have them something quick and small so that they can really kickstart and get their interest on it.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with what Alexander said, especially when I noticed when I teach adults, so when it's not a classroom situation, but more one-to-one situation, for me the hardest part is always to figure out what is this person interested in, and if I can get a hook into this, then I can teach anything, because then you see, wow, this is a method where I can solve my problem, as you said, and be it to sort his MP3 files or take his photos or whatever it is. Sometimes a very trivial task, and it's maybe not the best solution to do it with Python, but it's a solution that makes sense for this person and gives some sense of fulfillment and empowerment. Wow, I can do my computer do that.
I want also to add a couple of words about that. So it's easier to keep an interest on that project, because once you achieved some kind of like minimal like MVP and it works, you can start to add features and you see your results. You can do this iteratively. So it makes sense to go with that way.
In this round, many of you mentioned that it's critical to choose something to teach. So the subject is really, especially Horst said that he even tries to find out what the person likes. So I would like you to make another round, and I also want to invite every listener to think about questions, what they want to know from the audience. So let's make another round while you think. What the things are you already have successfully used as a subject for teaching? Because that might be interesting for every one of us, especially if this is not quite conventional or whatever. So, yeah, let's do it the other way around.
Yeah, I can just give one example. I had one student as an adult, and for some reason we made 3D graphic with VPython, which is one of my next talks. And I could feel that he was long out of school, and it was not, he said he's interested in it, but it was not really his thing. It was not clicking. Yeah, so he made the graphics and I explained, but it was not, I did not reach his emotions. And then for some reason he said me, he showed me what he's doing. It was with techno music, and he had some equalizers that make oscillating graphs when the beat of the electro music booms, and the faster the music goes, the faster these graphs are oscillating. And then we made this in 3D. We hooked up some Python library to analyze the sound in real time, and then made our three-dimensional cubes oscillating and changing colors. And this was his thing. And from this moment, then he was also, before, he said he was interested, but then I could feel in his eyes he is interested. So I think it's one of these things. Sometimes you have to go a big detour to reach someone's center heart.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a bit difficult to answer, because the people who came typically to SciPy and they want to contribute or other things, they already have sort of interest there. And what we try here to do is to see, okay, what are your pain points right now, and what's preventing you to actually start to contribute, and we try to address that. So most of the time for scientific packages is about just building the environment, and that's we spend actually quite a lot of time to show people that, yeah, we actually have nice tooling to help people contribute and onboard. So that's what we try to focus on. And then it's just a matter of giving them, make them feel confident they can actually do something, and that even on a big project like SciPy, which is 20 years old, you can still contribute meaningfully as a new joiner, even in the Python ecosystem. You still have some value to provide to the community, and a lot of value actually, even as a student or something like that.
I already mentioned a Telegram bot because I did it with my wife, and that's a good start because you see like immediate result. Like after spending maybe an hour working with examples, you will already have something working and you can improve it and add some features. The second example, again, I mentioned that it was related to Pygame model. It's an amazing model with a lot of examples. We have chosen, it was like a game where you have a starship and like aliens moving to you, and you could like fire like a bullet and destroy aliens. Like I asked my wife to implement like a missile that will explode by like clicking the button and will like destroy all the aliens in some range. So it was very interesting. Like, but I think it depends on like your environment, because when we are talking about like teaching somebody on my job, right, in production environment, we should find something related to our like tasks. For instance, there is a junior engineer in my company, and he does not do any programming, but I noted that he was attracted with like LLMs, like ChatGPT, and I suggested him to start like write some Jupyter notebooks, try to parse some data with like open source models, and he was attracted by that, so that's also an option, I would say.
So basically my topic is doing architecture with students in Python and Blender 3D. So I have a very good feeling that this Python API, you can learn a lot as a developer in how they solved it, because what's very interesting, very interestingly, is that if you run any task, whatever it is, you're creating a cube, you're moving it, whatever you do, you see a Python code that is the equivalent to do this in a script. And this is a very nice method to start out. I'm coming from Python in Maya. This is very complicated because you have to know the API, you have to know what you're doing and how to access it. And this is completely overwhelming when you're starting out. You do not know the language, and then you do not know an API, but you want to create stuff. You want to do architecture or whatever. You're not a computer scientist. And in Blender, they solved it very nicely, because you have a task and you're doing it 5 times a day. Then you somehow think to yourself, how can I animate this? And then you see, okay, I have these Python snippets and I have to connect it in a specific order. And then I'm just automating what I have done. And it's a good way to start out, because you see, okay, this is really helping me. I'm doing stuff faster. And then you can start out filling it with logic. You can do a conditional, you can do a while loop, and you can say, okay, I want to run it until a goal is reached. But actually starting out with some basic automation of tasks, in my experience with architectural students, this is a very good way to start out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that everybody kind of has a different answer, because it kind of depends on the audience. I know that when I'm working with people and teaching them to code, the original thing that we were doing is like building blogs, because blogs was a big deal, and this was 20 years ago. And it's like, oh, I want to build my own blog. So there had to be something practical, something useful, and like you said, Alexander, like something complicated enough that it wasn't going to be trivial. It was something that you were going to have to take some steps to do. And I think that when it comes to teaching someone to code, and I mean, like in Python or in any language really, there has to be a practicality. Right now, I think a lot of people are focused on the LLMs. They are focused on how to integrate AI with things. But at the same time, the world is working with APIs. And so teaching people like what an API is, how to get information from it and how to then display that in the way that you want is very key. For a while, when I was working at Spotify, we would show people how to like download their own playlists and make little apps to manipulate them. Or one person, wanted to, this is a whole wife-husband discussion, but he wanted to explain to his wife why there wasn't so much difference in the music that they listened to. So he built an app in Python called Boil the Frog. And what it would do is he'd say, well, I like, heavy metal. I like Amon Amarth, which is like a Viking metal band. And you love Taylor Swift. And believe it or not, I can show you in 10 steps how you get from one to the other. And it was like a super cool app, but he wanted that practicality to say, listen, we're not so different. I plug into this API, I write some very basic code, and it shows me the 10 steps to get from one to the other. And I think that level of practicality is where you have to focus when you're teaching someone to do something. There needs to be something concrete that's delivered at the end, but there also needs to be, like you were saying, an iterative way of developing it. You need to say, all right, so here's where I figure out what an API is. Here's where I figure out how to connect to it. Here's where I actually start getting information. Here's how I learn to display it. And going through that iteration to understand you're building on a foundation. It's not unlike teaching kids how to play with Lego bricks. Like, yeah, we have to have the green grass field first. Then we start adding small bricks. Oh, look, now we've built a house. So I think that when it comes to learning, there's not a lot of difference when you're teaching someone to code or teaching someone something in the physical world. It's just a matter of teaching that practicality, teaching that applicability, something that applies to them, something they're interested in that makes the big difference.
So to sum up, we have very diverse fields you are working in. That's very interesting. I think the common ground, what you mentioned, that it's relevant for the person I'm teaching things to. So maybe we take a round. Someone from the audience wants a question or something. Yeah, microphone is coming.
I would like to ask a question.
Here.
Maybe not so much a question, but maybe some food for thought. I have some years in experience now in teaching a Python basic course for PyLadies, and I think this actually quite encompasses quite well what all of you have said. Like, we have the basic course which runs for a semester, and first we need to onboard them with very simple things that they immediately hook them. Then we have like exercises where we try to like either do something visual. For example, we're doing loops, for loops and while loops. We're using the turtle module in order to visually show what is actually happening, and then they can play around with that and then make some changes, draw a house with for loops. It's amazing what simple stuff you can already do. Then there's the playful aspect. For example, when we're teaching classes, we're doing like something fun, like, okay, we have not just basic objects and classes, but we have like kittens and pets, and they're doing some barking or eating or anything. And also like the practical stuff. In the end, we're teaching them how to access web APIs, like for example, how to get the weather forecast for the next day and so on for a particular location. So I think these three things, they are really, really good in hooking them and also keeping them on a trajectory. One final note is like the trajectory is also quite important. Like, I experienced this myself when I tried to learn Rust. I used a service called Codecrafters, and it was really great for a start. But then there was like a leap in difficulty, and this actually really lost me because I only have so much time to spare. And this was actually the point where I was so frustrated and actually somewhat cancelled. I will still continue. I will power through that, but I know now there is some sort of a barrier, and this is completely unnecessary. You have to slowly increase the challenge, but also not too slowly to lose them. So it is a balance, I would say. Yeah, so those are my remarks. Sorry, I don't have any questions.
So the others also think about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting what you said, because I think that, I know that when I started out as a developer, I'm old, so there weren't a lot of resources to begin with. But even today, it seems like there's tons of getting started stuff, and there's tons of super complicated, like really computer science, getting down to the bare metal stuff. But there's that whole middle section that seems to be missing. And I think this is where like technical education is the focus. This is why it's still important, whether it's workshops or formal education or even online videos. Like, this is the key, because all of that intermediate, all of that middle level stuff always gets lost. Like, we are so great at getting people started in coding, and then 2 years later they've completely dropped it because it got too hard. And the next step was a big step, and it's super hard to take. So I think that there needs to actually be more focus on public content, open source content, for that intermediate step.
I completely agree with that statement. Like, when we did interviews for people, actually the testing of the language knowledge was something like 1/3. And another third part was because we worked with the hardware, it was related to the hardware, and the third one was related to the tools, right? So like the knowledge of like Grafana, some databases that we used. So it's like to be able to execute tasks as a software engineer, it's more than just to know the Python. You should know also like the network. You should know like about Linux, I would say, depending on the context where you work, but like operating system and like tools, you need to know them. And I think today it's even more the case than it was like 2 or 3 years ago. We have more tools and you need to master them.
Hey everyone. More of a add-on to the discussion. I have worked previously in EdTech and helped people launch their careers. I also find this very helpful that nowadays, because of the social media, we have a lot of access to everyone. And what generally works is also a reward mechanism. So when people create even if a small page and then they put it online and then they share it with people on social media or Reddit or something, and then when people get themselves involved in it, comment on it, reply on it, I think it really makes a lot of difference to have this reward mechanism. So to tell people to not only code, but also to show, present their work outside, that, you know, I learned HTML today, and then this is such an interesting tag, and I used it, and I created this web page and a screenshot of the web page. Because right now, we also live in a world where we see people posting their companies, and they launched 5 companies in a day, and we feel that maybe this Spotify dashboard that I made is not a big deal. But once I post about it and once the conversation starts to go around it, I think this reward mechanism really makes a lot of difference in a community setting. And in addition to that, of course, I think one more thing that I usually find helpful is to combine hobbies with your project. So people who want to build their portfolio, who are actually looking for a job, they don't know what to build, but they want a job in data science or something, right? Which is a good goal. But it helps to link to get to that goal if you can combine your hobby with it. For example, if I'm a chess player, then I can create an app that sort of it takes a picture of a chessboard and, you know, use computer vision and have that chess as a notation on a system. So to combine it with a hobby, so you can sort of also engage in that way, and it also brings more joy to you when you discuss these projects with other people. You know, I created an app with chess, and then you can talk about chess as well, though it is not a major point of discussion, but to combine these things also helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to come back a bit on the journey and accompanying the student in the teaching process. I think that's really important to really not lose the person after 2 months that they finish this quick start, and then now they're in this middle phase, and they actually need to do some work and to step up so that they arrive at a comfortable level to be able to do things. I think it's really important for the educator to still be present and still be very focused and pay attention to not lose that person. And that's something we try to do in open source a bit when we have new people coming in. These contributors, they make their first pull request and then they merge it. But then you really need here to go back to that person and ensure that they have all the necessary tools and all the support that they need to actually continue and to stay invested here. And just on what you just said about the reward system, I think it worked for some people. So that's definitely something we should do more, like have a space, for instance, for writing blogs when they finished a pull request or something like that. So in terms of open source contribution, I'm talking about. And so we have these kind of spaces, but yeah, there's there's a lot of friction here, also on the review, because especially for a big project, you know, if the people want to write some blog post, then we also require them to write a PR, and then there's some review involved. So there's also on the education side, on the educator side, a lot of unnecessary friction, which we tend to put because we tend to have higher barriers of entry. And I think there's also a lot of work to do on our side to lower the barrier of entry and be more supportive and accepting that things are not perfect.
Just before the next thing, what you brought up and what I also hear from you is there is a gap between starting and between hardcore computer science or whatever you call it. Let's keep that in the background, how we deal with that and how each of you deals with that. Yeah, and I'm giving to Robert.
Yeah, my question concerns more the section in learning at the very beginning, not so much the progress I was teaching there. And I want to share some experience and ask you what you think about it, because I had a very good experience, and I always observe people finding good examples to start with. I have good experience with not doing examples at all, and not concentrating on what the program produces or outputs or something like this, but on the internal structure of the program, and putting this maybe in some kind of debugger or something like this, and make the variables, the classes and whatever just dance in themselves without producing much output actually. To let students concentrate on the inner working of the machine and letting them think what they can do with it afterwards. What do you think about this approach? Because I always think at the very beginning, they concentrate too much on the output, on the printfs, and not so much on the structure of the program. And so for me, this was a good approach to teach the very beginners. What do you think about that?
Yeah, personally, I sort of don't like this approach. I personally don't like this approach to actually focus on the inner working at first. I think it's a very high barrier of entry, because you really need to have that person interest and to really...
Just a remark, this was not so, because it was actually about telling a story, a real life story, in terms of variables and procedures. So this was the game, so to say. So it was not such a high... actually, I taught it to children. So you probably imagined the wrong thing. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood, but...
We have different experiences and we are discussing them, so it's not right or wrong.
Yeah, sure. I'm just saying that I personally, I don't think that personally that at least that doesn't work for me, and I think there's some class of students that it will not work for, because to be able to really go inside something, you need first to have some interest about it, and it's difficult to trigger that interest for somebody if there's no extrinsic motivation. So.
Yes, I guess these two approaches are completely fine. Maybe one question is when thinking about what you will get from Python coding. Maybe this is one crucial question, because program is a lot of you doing an input and you getting an output, and especially in these times of these large language models, it's getting more and more important of dealing with these questions. What is a good question? What is a bad question? And maybe in a more abstract way, what is an acceptable answer and what not. And I guess this is one very crucial thing when you see people starting out, especially with large language models. Very often I see that they are asking questions that are not even related with their problem, and they are accepting answers that are not even related to their problem. And maybe this is one very crucial thing, that you are able to ask questions on what you're doing right now and what answer you would accept as defined. And when you transfer this, what input do you put into a program, and what when do you know that your goal is reached? I guess for the program and also for your learning curve, when do you accept that this goal that you have set to yourself is reached? And I guess that's one very important thing, that as a teacher, you see what is the background, what is the student able to do, and is he even able to reach the goal, and does he know that he has reached it?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point here, because we were kind of talking about this before we started, but the way people are learning to code when it comes to, you know, the LLMs and the various code things is it's dangerous in a way. When we teach people to code, whether we're teaching, I mean, you said you're kind of teaching not focused on output, but then you mentioned a debugger, which means there's still output. It might not be an application or a website or something you see in the browser, but in the debugger, it's still output. When people decide to go on their own and try to learn from the LLMs, a lot of times there's so many things that are hidden. There's so many things they're not seeing based on the prompt they wrote. Because it could be like, hey, build me an application to tell me what my bank balance is every day based on this Santander API. And is that a good prompt? Like, no, actually it probably isn't a good prompt. There's so much left unsaid there. Like, probably this prompt is going to build a database. You don't know what it says. You didn't specify what language you wanted it to use. So maybe it'll use Python, maybe it'll use TypeScript, maybe it'll use something completely unsecure. Learning through the LLMs is kind of a negative at this point. I think if you're a skilled developer and you're using Copilot or Windsurf or Cursor or one of those tools, then that's different, because you kind of already know what you're looking for. You're just asking it to help you do, you know, some craft work, some things that, you know, some scaffolding that you don't really want to do. When you're inexperienced in code and you're expecting to learn how to code from an LLM, you're making a huge mistake. So I think that message needs to get out more. Like, you're better off learning from a human who might make a few mistakes here or there, but get you moving in the right direction, than to go to an LLM and expect it to teach you how to code Python.
I personally like ChatGPT, but not in a way when you ask to build for you an app, but if you are using it like instead of Google, because the answers it produces, mostly they are better than answers from Google, like from Stack Overflow, and I would say even they are better than mostly my answers are. But the key to learning process is to keep person attracted, and that's all. If you need for that to debug something like with breakpoints, like whatever works for you, use it.
Yeah, let's make another round on that intermediate thing. Are you even seeing people after the start phase? So when you're teaching, are you seeing them in this intermediate phase, or is this something people still are on their own? What do you think about that? Maybe I give it to Horst first.
Yeah, I think I have the privilege to start with rather young people. So my youngest students are sometimes 9 or 10 years old. And I would say when they then come into 14 or so, I can say they're already intermediate level, and I can work with them like an adult. As I often, like, we create a game together, and it's enjoyable because I teach them from nothing to this level, and now we cooperate. But I must also say that some of my students, then I was thinking they're rather good and will choose a career in IT, and they reached a level where they said, you know, I can code, but it's not my way, and they started something completely different, like going into art or some different ways. So I think it's a human life. No? Just because you're an intermediate coder does not mean you will become a good coder. There's not more to it.
Maybe we make the whole round. Sure. If you don't know what to say, just pass it on. Don't want to force you.
Yes.
Like, my opinion is that it makes sense to learn coding even if you are not a software engineer. Like, I am talking right now about the Python, because that's a Swiss knife, right? You can automate tasks. If you are like an accountant and like you are using these Excel spreadsheets to like calculate salaries, if like your company did not buy some other software, but like you can apply Python to automate things, and I think it makes sense to invest some time and learn it. It will give you like benefits during your career.
Yeah, I completely agree, because one of the big question is you are able to follow a course, you are able to follow the given example, whatever it is, but are you able to apply it to your situation? And I guess that's one of the hardest parts, but if you're a good teacher, then you're preparing an example to teach something and you have understand a concept beyond it. But of course the question is, does this concept fit to your problem? And I completely agree to you with the large language models, because I guess there is also a very huge difference if you have knowledge, you know I'm solving a problem like this, or you have really learned it and say, okay, I have made this step and I have made somehow this evidence by myself, and I'm beyond understanding it deeply and not only knowing how to do it. Because I guess that we have all information is accessible how to do stuff. The problem is, when do you access it and are you able to actually work with this? If you're going as a beginner to a library on PIP and you read, okay, this is an amazing library, it can do exactly what I'm asking for, but I'm not able to apply it because I'm completely missed out the basics. And the question is, can you skip this? If you have the answer and you're typing in a question in a large language model, or you're asking a teacher, that's giving you a final code, but you are somehow lost in, you know this is working like this, but you don't really understand it, and you don't have made this step in, okay, this is why it's going to happen or not.
Just one thing. I also was in that situation, and I'm quite experienced, so sometimes the library just has bad documentation and you can't figure out how to use it. So judging, is it me or is it the library, is also difficult.
Well, I think the interesting thing here is we're talking about going from getting started to intermediate, and I think that there's some key things there. Like, one of the things is their interest. I think a lot of people, especially if they do like a workshop or something like that, and they get that initial feedback that they're like, great, I can build a website, I can build a small application, I can do the little thing that I want to do. That might be the end. Like, that might be good enough for them. They know it well enough. They're not planning on a big career and being a developer, and that's fine. I think that for a lot of people who are looking for that intermediate thing, like they understand the basics and they want to take the next steps, the key thing to remember is that Python's open source. So like, you can go to a repo and say, all right, I am interested in how this package works. I'd like to contribute back to it. I'd like to, and I mean, it's easy to start. I always tell people, if you want to contribute to open source, start by contributing documentation. And it can be as simple as saying, like, I speak more than one language. I'm the only person on this panel who doesn't speak more than one language. I'm American. But I know more than one language. I'm going to take this and I'm going to translate this into German, because that's going to make it easier for German people to access it. They don't want to read the English version. They find it more easy to get to the point of the documentation if it was translated. Great, that's amazing. And when you're doing that, that's when you start to learn those deeper things. You're like, okay, if this is what the documentation's saying, this is what the code is saying, I now understand this package a lot better than I ever did. Cool, I've taken that extra step. I'm beyond getting started. I think the hard part is, a lot of people think, and this is where what you mentioned, I'm doing this publicly. And that's like, we are one of the few people that, both in teaching and in coding, you do a lot of this in public. Like, a lot of this is put up on GitHub. It's easy to find. There's repos and things like that. Most jobs, going back to your example as an accountant, accountants generally don't have to do things in public. Maybe they have to report some things to the government, but like, they don't really have to be like, all right, so I create spreadsheets and I've built these awesome macros. Now I'm going to put that in a repo. They're not going to put that in a repo. Doesn't mean it's not valuable to them, but I think people get very nervous when they realize the next step from building that small personal project is putting things out in the open that other people can see. And maybe, to be honest, they might criticize it. They might say, oh, why did you do this way? Or why are you using Python instead of JavaScript, which is like obvious because JavaScript is terrible. But like, the point is, you're putting something out there, and it's very difficult, I think, for people to put something out there. So I think that's the extra problem with the intermediate step is it becomes an open situation where you're revealing yourself to the world in a way.
If I can add one point on that, I 100% agree that this next step is going to the open, but there's even like a slightly step before that is just seeing that this is open and that Python is a community and there are people who are just here in the open, here to help you if you need. And that's actually not a lot of people, even experienced people, realize that, yeah, if you use something like NumPy and things, you can actually go on the repo, find the information about the socials and actually ask questions to the maintainers themselves. And they will reply most of the time. And you can even join community calls and things like that. So that's also before even putting your own code out there, you can already benefit from the community by just going a bit out there and see what's there. And even in these community calls, you don't even have to turn off your webcam or anything. Most of the time, you can just sit there, relax, just enjoy the show. And if you have a question, type it, and people will answer and will just accept you like that. So
We take another question, and there is also one. Then we make a round where everyone maybe summarizes what was important for them.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution. And Horst is my original Python teacher. So Horst, thank you for organizing PyCon Austria, as well as being my teacher for, gosh, what, 5, 6 odd years. To the point of the GitHub, I have reached a point now with the help of large language models. I have published over 150 trivial apps on GitHub in the last 4 months. I have an idea in the shower, I code it up, and it's online in anywhere between an hour to a day, depending on how complex the application is. I can now build CRUD applications in the space of an hour, and it's because of the training that I got and the encouragement I got from Horst, but it's also from the tools that are now available, the crutches, which are LLMs, the crutches that help me move forward as a developer. So it's, I'd like to hear how you think LLMs are going to help people who are not developers, but people who want to create solutions to my business problems, whether they be trivial or not, and to the point of the spreadsheet macros, whether or not anybody's gonna publish those. Yeah, I would use those spreadsheet macros if I could find them. And that goes to the point of how do the little people out here, you guys are all developers, I'm not, but I have real business problems and large language models help me solve them. So how do you see LLMs evolving in the education space? Thank you.
So I'm a mid-level developer. I wrote my first line of code like basically 5 years ago. I decided, yeah, that's the thing I want to do, did a bootcamp, and now I work in a web agency. Sorry, it's JavaScript, I know it's terrible. And the thing that brought me from like junior, I can write a loop, I can do conditionals, to I'm an actual developer in a company, was the art of feedback. To get people to show their code, even if it's the shittiest first line that you ever wrote, receive feedback on that, and also learn how to give feedback to others. Because one of the things where I learned the most is when I did feedback for a senior developer, and I was encouraged enough, knew enough about giving feedback to ask like, why did you use this function here? You could have used something else. Why did you use this? And that's the teaching moments where you level up to that, from junior to, I don't like those expressions, but that's where you can do like the next step, where you can actually learn, where you force your senior colleagues to teach you. That's actually something I learned from the Pi ladies, where also they kickstarted my journey into development. So thank you.
Thank you. That was very valuable, and I want to change that last round. Maybe if you want to put a little emphasis on human feedback versus machine feedback, because I think human feedback is still something that is very, very big part of the picture, and you learn better if you have human feedback. So let's go from there.
Okay, and I do want to address what Dennis mentioned as well. I think that in some ways LLMs are the future, but like I mentioned, you really have to know what they're giving you back before you incorporate that into a production level situation. I think that a lot of people, and I mentioned this in my talk yesterday, are using low code and no code solutions, but as if that's the new hotness. But Microsoft Access was a low code solution in 1995. It's not new. It's just the way that we're using it. This artificial intelligence is changing the face of what we do. And I think that goes into what we're saying about feedback. I think that, human feedback is tough, and these LLMs are definitely couched in a way that they'll give you feedback in a very more polite way. When I was learning open source initially, this is going back 20 years, I was getting very much into Ruby. I was coming from PHP and before that Windows programming. Windows, there was no such thing as feedback or communication. You just wrote code and built these giant 130,000 line programs and hoped for the best. There was no testing, there was no iteration. It was just, hey, let's do this. And then moving into the Ruby community, where positive feedback was very much a part of what they did. The Python community adopted that as well, very much a part. Whereas in the PHP community, at that time, not now, but at that time, even saying like, hey, I did this in Ruby, I want to know how you do this in PHP, they'd be like, what the hell are you doing here? I think that we've realized over time that positive feedback, good critique versus criticism, is what makes it important. I think that that's what drives someone to want to go to the next level. When you do put yourself out there and you say, hey, here's my code, and there's a big difference between, hey, why did you use this function here? Yeah, I will wrap it up. So why did you use this function here compared to, why did you use that function? Like there's a big difference in tone. And I think that that's important that we've moved towards that direction to get positive human critical feedback.
I completely agree. And also, due to the question of is a large language model able to help you learn code? I don't know. I think you can, of course, get a lot of interesting feedback when you change the way you ask. If you ask ChatGPT, how would a computer science answer these questions? It's going to be a different answer, like if you say, how would a biologist answer this question? How would a mathematician would answer these questions? And how would someone from the industry answer this? Or you would do this in a prototyping way. I guess the way you ask, and if you ask for just answer like a mathematician, you would get a completely different approach. And I guess that's very interesting because you get you get a lot of different variations of answers compared to human. It's the same way. If you ask a human, then you would check out what is his background, what is his intention, what is he able to do, and yes.
I want to emphasize that comment about feedback. I think that's really the critical thing. Like, first of all, you need to figure out that the code that you created today, it's not like the representation of your personality or something. If it was done bad, it does not mean that you are bad. It's just like something that you produces. And once you figure that out, it becomes easier to accept like a feedback. And seeking of the feedback is like a crucial part for your development. I completely agree with that.
I, of course, also agree that feedback is very important. Every time somebody is raising a PR or something like that, we always try to be as gentle as possible, because we know that people sometimes they might misinterpret our intention. And I think here the language that you use is crucial, especially in written communication, where sometimes you're really missing the nuances. There's this, and there's also the fact that we are all coming from different background, and cultural aspect also plays a role here. And sometimes you don't realize that somebody is just saying something nice from their perspective, and you're just taking it the wrong way. And here it's very important to be open on both sides. on the receiving side and on the giving side. And as educator, it's really something we really need to be aware of and try to, if we see that the person is not receiving well what we're saying, to really address it as soon as possible and try to know, hey, it's okay, sorry, we misunderstood each other, and try to really be supportive here. And yeah, the LLM, I have a lot of opinions about it, a lot of ethical concerns about it. I'm open source maintainer, as I said. We can discuss this afterwards. But here for the feedback, I think we're really missing something if we don't have a human in the loop, because you can always ask the LLM what you think about that code, but you're always going to get some nice answer, but is it really a nice answer? You're never going to know. And yeah, right now I'm trying to use some LLM to do some Rust because I'm also diving into Rust. I'm so frustrated. I want a human so badly to help me out and to tell me I'm dumb and things like that. And the LLM is not doing that for me right now.
Yeah, I want just to add thanks Fabian and thanks Roy that you here confessed that it's also hard to learn Rust. When I do, I always think I'm so stupid. But yeah, it's a nice feedback. And to the feedback lady, I want to say I remember very good one very special feedback I got, and it's some meta feedback. So someone gave a feedback to a feedback I got. I want to just tell this story because it's a bit funny. And I think maybe it was not helpful for my coding, but it was very helpful for my feelings. Yeah, I felt better and I enjoyed it to this day. It was before Facebook was a thing, and I made a little game with Pygame. And in this game, because I was so excited, wow, I can now code and then publish it. It was before GitHub, it was in SourceForge, I think. Yeah. And then I discovered, wow, in Japan, someone made a fan site about this game, and they discuss in Japanese this game that I uploaded. That I, in my paid work time, I was thinking about this. And then I understood people discussing features of this game. And it was just a little shooter. You had a penguin and you shoot on Microsoft Windows signs. Yeah. And because this was not enough, I made a marijuana sign, and when you pick it up, your shoot becomes crazy. Yeah. And then some guy, I don't know from where, he wrote, what an infamy that you make a game for children and there's a hemp symbol and there's a symbol of drug, and now the children will learn that this is something good. And so on. I was thinking, oh, actually, yeah, I did not think about this. Yeah. Interesting. And then someone other wrote to this feedback and said, you're a jerk. And I was so happy. And for me, this was very fascinating that a feedback can have a feedback.
So maybe these, thanks for everyone, maybe these things we discussed, intermediate level versus feedback, when do people give up and things like that, is something to keep in mind. Thanks for the discussion.